asking if we can please elevate our court reporter. Good morning to our court reporter. Are you ready for us to get started and go on the record?
I am Hearing Officer Kinsey. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I will start with introductions for our usual practice. Good morning. It is June 23rd, 2026. I'm Nicole Kinsey, presiding hearing officer for the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is the hearing on the pending petitions for change of water right permits 16478, 16479, 16481, and 16482 of the Department of Water Resources for the proposed Delta Conveyance project. I am conducting this hearing in accordance with the July 31st, 2024 Notice of Public Hearing and subsequent amendments. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom webinar and is being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video of this hearing are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording in the FTP folder for this proceeding. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. Ms. Mullen is with us today and will be handling the screen sharing of exhibits and moving along of the slides. If you are a witness, you may ask Ms. Mullen to advance to the next slide when you're ready during your presentation, and cross-examiners may address Ms. Mullen directly to bring up particular exhibits. We will take breaks today as usual, and we will have a hard stop today at 5 p.m. if we get to that point. I think I wanted to address, I don't see Ms. Desjardins on right now, but I think you may have seen Ms. Desjardins' request to postpone her testimony until, I believe, Thursday of this proceeding, which of course raises some questions about whether we can get through everything. I don't know that there's anything in particular to talk about. I saw that, I saw DWR, I saw your request, one that you would not be prepared, which I understand, to cross-examine anyone else today based on your reliance on the schedule, which is fair enough. And then also that you would, a preference for having Ms. Desjardins, not a preference, but a need for Ms. Desjardins to start earlier in the day on Thursday because of the availability of the person who's prepared to cross-examine her. So I'm aware of those constraints. I see hands, so maybe there are some solutions to this problem or discussion anyway. If we can please elevate Ms. Meserve and Ms. Carroll. Good morning, Ms. Meserve. You're welcome to make your appearance.
Good morning. Ocean Meserve for Contra Costa and other parties. We have had, we did see DWR's request regarding the timing for Ms. Desjardins, and I think that can work. So the way that would go is on the 25th, Thursday, Ms. Desjardins would go first, and then Mr. Burke and Mr. Wilson's panel for Central and South Delta Water Agency. So we also had held space for Emily and John Papalardo if their cross from tomorrow, Wednesday, did not finish. So I guess we could talk tomorrow about how exactly where to put them if there's a need to slice them into Thursday. But I think we're attempting to make the adjustments necessary for Ms. Desjardins and then the request of DWR.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Meserve. I really appreciate that. Ms. Carroll, did you want to jump in? And you're welcome to make your appearance. Good morning.
Good morning, Ann Carroll for DWR. No, thank you. Like, one of my questions was if it was being presented as a panel for Mr. Burke and Mr. Wilson. So that was helpful. Thank you. The other thing is, well, we'll see how things go, but we're dealing with some timing conflicts on Thursday that keep popping up. So as long as we can do it before 3, but was hoping that maybe we could still go in the same order of Mr. Burke and Mr. Wilson and then Ms. Desjardins, but we need to wait for the day to proceed a little further to make sure that we can iron a couple of things out. So we really appreciate the flexibility. We're trying to move things around. We thought yesterday, first thing in the morning would work, probably still does, but we're trying to rejigger some schedules.
Let's
Okay,
touch base.
yeah. I mean, just to be clear, I think Ms. Desjardins would prefer to go in the afternoon, and Burke and Wilson would prefer to go first thing, if that works for DWR, but just let us know. And,
Yeah.
right now we're going to plan on what you asked for, Ms. Carroll.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think the issue is as long as we can finish with Miss Desjardins by 3, it would work out in going in the existing order.
Okay. And your cross for Ms. Desjardins is estimated to be?
Currently it's estimated at 120 minutes, but we are trying to cut that down.
Okay.
Also, I just wanted a clarification. Is Miss Desjardins presenting on behalf of herself again, or is she presenting on behalf of the Center for Biological Diversity?
Mr. Beck will be assisting her with her presentation, and you'd have to look at her papers to see how it's presented. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, I guess we were confused because now it's Mr. Beck that's assisting her and somebody else had previously assisted. So it's just a helpful hand.
I believe so, yes.
There's Mr. Beck. If we can please elevate Mr. Beck. Good morning, Mr. Beck. You're welcome to make your appearance.
Yeah, thanks. I will be helping her as just a helping hand though, for some logistical reasons. Her rebuttal testimony was presented as herself pro per. But my plan was to help her today and now help her Thursday to get through the testimony. So thank you. Yeah, and thanks for the flexibility, everybody. Yesterday was a tough day for Deirdre.
Thank you, and thank you for letting us know. All right. Are there other things we should address before we get started with our day here? Let's see. And it looks like we're starting with Naji Zarif, if I am correct.
That's right. And if we could elevate Mr. Keeling, is going to help with his direct.
Excellent. Thank you. If we can please elevate Mr. Keeling. Good morning, Mr. Keeling. You're welcome to make your appearance.
Good morning. I don't know if I've been elevated or promoted. I'm always a little confused on that, but I like either one.
I think our practice now is elevation rather than promotion. I moved away from promotion. So.
Okay. Well, just I'm flattered to be elevated or promoted. Is Mr. Zarif on?
Mr. Zarif, I do not see. Oh, there we have. We were ahead of my ask. Good morning, Mr. Zarif. And I think you need to come off mute here.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Now we can hear you. And I will start by asking Mr. Zarif, my understanding is that you previously testified in this proceeding. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And do you recall taking the oath with respect to your testimony in this hearing?
Yes.
Thank you. Then with that, I will turn to you, Mr. Keeling.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Zarif.
Good morning, Mr. Keeling.
We are back at it, and this is your rebuttal testimony. I'd like to ask you if Exhibit SJC 9 is a true and correct copy of your curriculum vitae.
Yes, it is.
Do you have any updates or corrections for your curriculum vitae that you would like to make now?
I think the only update that I have is that it reflects at that time that I was the acting director of Public Works. And since then, I've been promoted to the director of Public Works.
Congratulations. One of us has been promoted, the other has been elevated.
Thank you.
Is Exhibit SJC 8 a true and correct copy of your written rebuttal testimony?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any corrections or updates on that testimony that you would like to make at this time?
Yes, I think the only thing that I'd like to clarify, or maybe this is a correction. So on page 3 of the document, this is paragraph 7 on page 3, which begins on line 11. So within that paragraph, I reference the DWR 804, which is the mitigation monitoring reporting program, and the page numbers that I reference, PDF page numbers 122 and 123, or to 123. I believe those should be, based off of a review here last night, that should be PDF pages 117 through 119, which are those sections of the MMRP that relate to transportation mitigation.
Thank you. That should be helpful. Is Exhibit SJC 10 a true and correct copy of your PowerPoint summary of your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any corrections or updates for that, for your PowerPoint?
No, I do not.
Well, with that, Mr. Zarif, why don't you go ahead and summarize your rebuttal testimony?
Excellent. And so will Ms. Mullen bring up the PowerPoint, or should I just?
She
Yes.
will.
All right. Well, yes, again, good morning, everyone. And so as Mr. Keeling mentioned, this is going to be a summary of my rebuttal testimony. You can, regarding the Delta Conveyance project, and if you will, you can go ahead and advance to the next page. So in general, what this testimony is going to cover or reflect is our San Joaquin County's belief that DWR lacks unambiguous, binding, and enforceable mechanisms to ensure that it will conduct necessary pre-construction road improvements, control road usage, or complete all necessary post-construction repairs related to the heavy truck damage that's going to.
We've lost your.
Sorry.
There we are.
There we go. Sorry, I got muted myself there. I don't know where I left off, but I'll just say this really quick again. That we feel like DWR, San Joaquin County, has concerns that DWRs lacks unambiguous binding and enforceable mechanisms to ensure that it will conduct the necessary pre-construction road improvements, that it will control the road usage, or complete all necessary post-construction repairs related to heavy truck damage. And so over the next few slides, I'll kind of highlight some of the concerns that we have. First off, as we mentioned, heavy truck traffic that's required for this project is undoubtedly going to damage the existing roads within the Delta. And DWR, while making some intentions to mitigate that, has not made any binding commitment to utilize the designated roads, relying primarily on the concept engineering report to document its commitment to utilize the roads that have been designated. It also relies on a DWR, relies on a technical memorandum that was prepared by the Delta Conveyance Authority to highlight or to demonstrate its commitment to repair roadways. Thus, there is no enforceable commitment to protect or repair the Delta road network. Next slide. DWR staff, through some of their testimony, has pointed to future contract terms and the potential use of unmarked cars to monitor construction traffic, as these mechanisms are ways that they'll be able to enforce compliance. But they've also identified that these are not fully refined, and this raises further questions regarding the enforceability of these mechanisms. What they did point out was that there was a binding commitment that they pointed to regarding road repair as a condition of its incidental take permit. But this would generally only apply to roads where bare soil is exposed, right? When we get to a point where erosion is an issue. And a significant level of the road damage occurs, when we look at damage, occurs before there is bare soil exposed. So that can amount to alligator cracking, structural damage to the roadbed, and et cetera. And so there's, again, no binding commitment to address this impact within their MMRP. Next slide. And so to wrap this up, again, we'll just highlight, or I will highlight that DWR lacks clear and enforceable mechanisms for controlling the location of construction traffic. Thus the scope of damage, and thus doesn't control the scope of damage to Delta roadways. DWR lacks clear and enforceable mechanisms to require repair of all of the damaged Delta roads, and the Delta tunnel will thus impose an unmitigated and costly level of damage to Delta roads that farmers, recreational users, and general population relies on.
Thank you, Mr. Zarif. Can you explain, clarify the term alligator cracking?
Sure. So alligator cracking is coined that way because the roadway surface essentially looks like the back of an alligator. And so what happens is that there's cracks on the road, which start off as large, but as that damage continues, they become smaller. The cracks, essentially propagate throughout the pavement, and they become much small. These very small cracks that look like the skin of an alligator. And that is an indication that the roadway has failed, and it's not providing the structural integrity that it needs to.
Thank you. I've been practicing law for 41 years. I have yet to hear that term. Thank you. I learn every day. And that hearing officer Kinsey is Mr. Zarif's rebuttal testimony.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Zarif. I will look to DWR. Looks like Ms. Carroll, do you have questions for Mr. Zarif?
I do. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Zarif. It's good to see you again.
Yes, good morning.
And just a couple of things. And Ms. Mullen, maybe if we could pull up Mr. Zarif's rebuttal testimony, that'll help us keep things moving this morning.
And that's SJC, well, she knows, SJC 8.
She's so magical. I don't even have to look it up anymore for her. So sorry, Ms. Mullen, I rely on you greatly. So Mr. Zarif, for on page 2, paragraph 4, your testimony states that Ms. Buchholz does not demonstrate civil engineering expertise in road construction, road impacts, or road repair. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you aware of Ms. Buchholz's role on the DCP?
Just to the extent of what I don't recall it specifically, but I think she mentioned that in some of her testimony, her original testimony.
Ms. Mullen, could we pull up DWR 34 so I can help refresh Mr. Zarif? And I think if we scroll down just a little bit.
Did this say Ms.
I'm sorry?
Buchholz?
Oh, can we go back up to the top, Ms. Mullen? Yes, it's the statement of qualifications for Ms. Buchholz.
Okay.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, if we could scroll down to the middle of the page again. Thank you for the reminder. Mr. Zarif, do you see that first listing under select professional experience?
I do, yes.
And is that Ms. Buchholz's role with the Delta Conveyance project?
That's what she's communicated or stated as her role. I have no reason to doubt it.
Okay, thank you. And for Ms. Buchholz's role, as it's stated, she's providing coordination between the engineering, environmental, and regulatory teams. Is it your position that engineering expertise in all areas of engineering and construction is required for this role?
No, that's not what I communicated, no.
Okay. And then, Ms. Mullen, if we could please go back to Mr. Zarif's testimony, page 2. And let's see. Lines 24 through 28 there, Mr. Zarif. You could read through that briefly to refresh your recollection.
Yes.
Okay. So is your concern that the prohibition on the use of non-designated local roadways is not, as you state, a binding commitment?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Sure. So is it your concern that the prohibition on the use of non-designated local roadways is not a binding commitment? Is that your issue, that it's not a binding commitment?
My concern is that there is no binding commitment to utilize the designated roads and only those roads. And so if there is some use of non-designated roadways, there appears to be a lack of ability to, or at least right now, any clear way to enforce that.
Okay. So I guess, can you explain to me, what do you mean by a binding commitment?
Something that would be able to hold that the agency accountable, right? That they've made as a commitment, such as what's in the EIR and the mitigated monitoring program. They've said these are the things that we are going to do specifically within an adopted environmental document.
And would you consider by the State Water Resources Control Board a binding document?
Objection to the extent it calls for a legal conclusion.
Noted, and you can respond, Mr. Zarif, within your area of expertise.
I'm sorry, I missed the very part from the beginning of it. You cut off.
Oh, no worries. You mentioned that a binding commitment would be from a legally binding document. So I was asking, do you believe that, excuse me, a permit issued by the State Water Resources Control Board is a binding commitment?
I'm not sure that I would say that it's a commitment or as much as that may be an obligation.
So would you believe that a permit issued to DWR by the Water Board would be something DWR would be required to comply with?
Same objection.
Noted. Please, Mr. Zarif.
I guess I would say I would expect that they would comply with that, and I think they would, they would have no reason unless there was. I would say yes. I would expect that they would comply with the permit that's been issued to them.
And then, Ms. Mullen, if we could go to page 4, lines 8 to 9, please. And then again here, Mr. Zarif, I won't make everybody listen to you read, but if you could refresh yourself with paragraph 9.
Yes.
And so I'll ask you again, this is about your concern that this is not a binding commitment. So do you believe that enforcement on the prohibition on the use of non-designated local roadways is not a binding commitment?
Objection to the extent it calls for a legal conclusion.
And noted. Please, Mr. Zarif.
I'm sorry. Yeah, please repeat that again one more time.
So is it your concern that the enforcement on the prohibition on the use of non-designated local roadways is not a binding commitment?
I'm concerned that they have yet to provide documents or a plan to enforce that restriction, which to me is not a binding commitment, if that makes sense.
So if the prohibition on the use of non-designated local roadways, including enforcement through monitoring and imposition of monetary fines, were to be made a legally required condition of the project, would that address your concern?
Objection calls for speculation based upon a vague and unspecified set of requirements.
To the extent you can answer, Mr. Zarif, please, and you can caveat as well. I understand it's a somewhat general question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess it depends on. I mean, there's a lot of openness to that question in terms of like what's included in those requirements, what that entails. But in theory, if there was a legally binding obligation on them, that could potentially allay our concerns.
Mr. Zarif, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's all of my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll, and I will look to the room. Are there others who have questions for Mr. Zarif? And I do not have questions at this time, so Mr. Keeling, do you have any redirect?
Subject to the views of my co-counsel, Ms. Meserve, I do not have
I
redirect.
just had one redirect question, if we could. Ms. Carroll asked you, Mr. Zarif, about the hypothetical if there were to be conditions on the permit that this body, the water board, would issue. And I just wondered if you would have any concerns about enforceability of contract term or permit terms that specified certain roadways be used, as Ms. Carroll was indicating.
If I would have concerns about,
Enforceability of
yeah,
permit terms that require a contractor to use specific roadways.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on, I mean, I would have some concerns about that, depending on, sort of what those restrictions are and what sort of burden that they place on the contractor, and whether or not the contractor would be able to demonstrate that they are unreasonable and don't allow them to, and essentially, as an agency, we cannot put terms on a contractor that go against the law, right? And so, to the extent that those conditions are not legally, I guess, viable, then I would have some issues with that, right? So there are things. So I just leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Meserve. And Ms. Carroll, do you have
I have
follow-up?
no follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. Then with that, Mr. Zarif, I want to thank you so much for your time and joining us this morning and for your testimony. You are excused. Very much
Thank
appreciated.
you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Keeling. Mr.
Thank
Keeling,
you.
are you staying with us for the next witness, or are we
Well, you can, I guess, if you elevate me, I guess you can de-elevate me now.
Well, I don't need to I wasn't I just didn't know if I should look to you for, let's see, who do we have next?
I'll be helping
Well, I
Mr.
will.
Lucas with his direct. But
Mr.
you
Lucas.
can
Okay.
you can leave Mr. Keeling in his elevated location. And we'll
Yes.
I will just blank myself out here.
All right. So we will look to elevate Mr. Lucas, it sounds like. I see him in the waiting room, so. Or attendee status, in the attendee room. Good morning, Mr. Lucas.
Good morning.
And as I recall, you previously testified in this proceeding, is that correct?
I did.
And do you recall taking the oath with respect to your testimony in this hearing?
I do recall that.
Excellent. Then with that, Ms. Meserve, I'll look to you.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Lucas.
Good.
Is Land 51 a true and correct copy of your resume?
It is.
And are there any updates to your resume we should know about?
No, there are not.
And then is Land 67 a true and correct copy of your written rebuttal testimony?
It is.
And then are Land 69 through 79 the new references that are cited in your testimony?
They are.
And then were there any corrections that you needed to make to your testimony or your PowerPoint?
Corrections have already been submitted to my PowerPoint, and that was to add several page numbers that had been missing, and those have been added to the slides. And then in, I believe, 3 places, I had referred to a report as the DCR scenarios report, whereas my written testimony refers to it as the scenarios DCR report. So I have changed it to the latter in those 3 places in my testimony.
Great. Okay, well, Ms. Mullen, if we could go ahead and bring up Land 68, your PowerPoint, and then we can go ahead and let you summarize your testimony. Thanks.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Hearing Officer Kinsey, board members, and the other parties to this hearing. My testimony is again focused on the climate change scenarios that DWR used for the analyses submitted for these hearings, the assumptions behind those scenarios, and the adequacy of those assumptions. And I need to give Ms. Mullen a heads up that I will be skipping over slides in several places. I will alert to that. My written testimony covers many complex issues, and I was too optimistic about what I could reasonably present in this summary. Next slide, please. In my testimony last fall, I provided evidence that DWR had failed to follow its own guidance and scientific best practices in developing the 3 future climate scenarios used for evaluating the performance and impacts of the DCP in the final EIR. As a result, those 3 scenarios did not reflect plausible futures in which the project area would have substantially lower average annual precipitation than historically. Subsequently, the hearing officer requested that DWR provide additional climate scenarios and analyses to supplement the original 3. In response, DWR submitted a set of 4 level of concern climate scenarios and associated analyses of DCP performance and impacts. This is called the additional modeling. And I'll refer to the climate scenarios collectively as the LOC scenarios. As Mr. Schwartz indicated in his rebuttal testimony, DWR had initially developed the LOC scenarios for the purposes of the 2023 State Water Project Delivery Capability Report, or DCR. The methodology behind the LOC scenarios is described in the 2023 Risk-Informed Future Climate Scenarios Report, which I refer to as the Scenarios DCR Report in my written submittals, but I will simply use Scenarios Report in my remarks today. The LOC scenarios rely on newer climate model projections from the CMIP-6 archive, while the original scenarios were based on projections from the CMIP-5 archive. But more significantly, to develop the LOC scenarios, DWR employed a novel workflow it had not previously used in total in their planning studies. 2 of the 4 LOC scenarios, 2043-95 LOC and 2085-75 LOC, do depict somewhat drier futures in terms of average precipitation and stream flow than the original 3 DCP climate scenarios. And in his rebuttal testimony, Mr. Schwartz asserted that the LOC scenarios now provide, quote, sufficient information to evaluate project impacts under extreme future conditions, unquote. Next slide, please. However, the LOC scenarios are only extreme with respect to the overly narrow frame of reference that DWR's novel workflow has created. Other best available science model data and evidence indicates that scenarios substantively drier than any of the LOC scenarios are still highly plausible. In my opinion, even the drier LOC scenarios provide an overly optimistic view of what conditions the future climate could plausibly bring to the project area, and not a worst case scenario, just a bad case scenario. So the main conclusions from my testimony last year still hold for DWR's newer LOC climate scenarios. They are inadequate for evaluating the performance and impacts of the DCP under foreseeable climate changes. DCP project yield could be lower than DWR assumes, and the project's impacts to affected resources and parties could be larger than DWR assumes. Next slide, please. Of the 4 LOC scenarios, the more stressful ones at each time horizon are the 95th percentile level of concern at 2043, which I will shorthand as 95 LOC, and the 75th percentile level of concern at 2085. I've highlighted these 2 scenarios in yellow on this table from Mr. Schwartz's rebuttal. I will focus on 95 LOC, the second line of this table. 95 LOC incorporates a temperature increase of 1.8 degrees Celsius and a modest decrease in precipitation of just under 2%. That combination results in an overall model decrease in annual 8-river index flow of 6%, as well as a substantial shift towards earlier timing of snowmelt and spring runoff. So here, Ms. Mullen, let's skip ahead to slide 12, please. Thank you. So in this flow chart, I've summarized the steps of DWR's novel and complex workflow for the LOC scenarios, and we'll go through them in greater detail. But the main point is that at nearly every step, DWR's assumptions and choices narrowed the apparent plausible future climates in terms of both the average climate changes and the climate variability, the details. When you use global climate model projections to evaluate potential climate changes at more local scales and develop climate scenarios, there are many choices to make about the data and the methods. Some of these choices can be informed by measurable criteria, but these choices are ultimately subjective. There is no one right recipe or workflow. So as an analyst, you need to remain aware of the alternate choices, the paths not taken in your workflow. Otherwise, you may get a false sense that your final outputs, in this case, climate scenarios, are conclusive and precise. You may believe that newer climate models and new methods have actually reduced uncertainty rather than the workflow having narrowed your vision of the future, which is still very uncertain. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this methodology was laid out in the 2023 scenarios report. The draft of that report was peer-reviewed by 3 climate scientists who were tasked with evaluating the methodology and the suitability of the LOC scenarios for the purpose of informing the State Water Project DCRs. Their reviews were generally positive, though the reviewers proposed several changes and additions to the analyses that were not implemented by DWR in the final report. And we'll touch on some of these along the way. Next slide, please. So like the original 3 DCP climate scenarios, the 4 LOC climate scenarios were developed using a climate period approach, also called a period change approach. In a climate period approach, the climate models are only used to get at the average changes in temperature and precipitation. Those average changes, or change factors, are then used to shift or perturb the historical climate record and its inherent variability. And we see an example of that historical climate record and variability in this annual precipitation record for the Feather River watershed. So a climate period approach assumes that the details of future natural variability will look a lot like the past 100 years. But we know that future climate variability will not necessarily resemble the past. And even if anthropogenic climate change were not occurring, the climate variability of the past 100 years would be an inadequate template or proxy for future variability, as demonstrated by multi-century paleoclimate records. And DWR is quite aware of this inadequacy. Some of DWR's previous planning studies incorporated long paleo records so that water systems could be tested against drought sequences not seen in the relatively shorter historical record. Also, both recent observations and climate models indicate that anthropogenic climate change is influencing the very mechanisms of climate variability and their expression at local and regional scales, and climate change will continue to do that. Accordingly, a DWR guidance document from 2018 cautioned that using the climate period approach, borrowing and tethering to the historical climate and its variability, that approach limits the exploration of future changes in climate variability. Next slide, please. So in developing the 4 LOC climate scenarios, DWR did add a wrinkle to the typical climate period approach. DWR employed a stochastic weather generator called WGen to adjust the historical precipitation record in a manner consistent with the effects on precipitation of the future modeled warming. And this is called the scaling module of WGen. The plot on the left shows the unadjusted historical baseline annual precipitation for the Feather River. I showed these same data in the previous slide showing the annual values, but here I'm showing the 3-year running average. And I've done that to match up with the plot on the right, which is from Mr. Schwartz's rebuttal. It also shows Feather River watershed annual precipitation, 3-year running average, but as assumed in the 95 LOC scenario. So at first glance, they look pretty much the same, but WGen's scaling adjustments make the low precipitation years in 95 LOC on the right slightly drier, and the high precipitation years slightly wetter. The differences between these two plots also reflect subsequent steps in the LOC workflow. So the scaling module of WGen is kind of stretching the historical extremes slightly. But if 95 LOC does contain quote unquote very extreme drought conditions, as Mr. Schwartz asserted in his rebuttal testimony, that's because those droughts are present in the historical climate record on the left with nearly the same severity. But what stochastic weather generators are really designed to do is to create novel sequences of wet and dry years based on the statistics of historical weather, recognizing that the 100-year historical climate is not an adequate sample. DWR, however, did not deploy that core module of WGen to construct the LOC scenarios. And 2 of the 3 peer reviewers of the scenarios report flagged that the report was unclear or confusing regarding how much of the capabilities of WGen were actually used by DWR. If DWR had deployed the stochastic generator model of WGen and incorporated that output into the LOC scenarios, even partially or indirectly, those scenarios would have shown a much broader range of dry and wet multi-year extremes than DWR arrived at with its very limited use of WGen's capabilities. And Ms. Mullen, let's skip to slide 16, please. So whenever you use a climate model data set, you're faced with a choice of which data set to use. DWR's choice of data set and their subsequent choices led to a limited sampling of the diversity of climate models and their different views of future climate change for California, especially with respect to precipitation. In the primary CMIP6 archive, you have output or projections from 55 climate models that have been run one to many times under one or more of 7 different emission scenarios. And then the CMIP6 LOCA2 dataset developed at Scripps has downscaled output from roughly 25 models that were run one to several times under 3 emission scenarios. DWR, however, elected to use a California-specific version of CMIP6 LOCA2 called LOCA2 Hybrid, in which the 25 models had already been screened down to 15 models chosen because they better simulate California's historical climate. But because of a later step in the workflow, DWR couldn't use some of the output in the LOCA2 hybrid data set in the LOC scenarios, and so ultimately their ensemble was 11 models run under one emission scenario, and then only 8 models run under each of the other 2 emission scenarios. Now, we don't know which climate model has the best structure or model physics to accurately predict future anthropogenic changes in precipitation for California. So for the purposes of exploring or lining out plausible climate futures, it's better to consult more models than fewer. When you consult fewer models, the overall range of temperature and precipitation futures shown across the models tends to shrink, giving the false impression that you've reduced the uncertainty. Next slide, please. So LOCA2 and LOCA2 hybrid are not the only downscaled model datasets that are available based on the CMIP6 archive. This was also true in 2023 when DWR was writing up the methodology for the LOC scenarios. Different downscaling procedures often result in differing depictions of local climate change, even given the same underlying global model output. For example, 2 recent studies have shown that dynamically downscaled data sets, like those on the right, depict future changes to precipitation mechanisms for the Western US, and thus changes in precipitation that are not seen in the global model output or in statistically downscaled data sets like CMIP6 LOCA2 hybrid. One of the peer reviewers of the 2023 scenarios report recommended that in future work with climate scenarios, DWR assess the extent to which dynamically downscaled data sets show differences from statistically downscaled data sets over the state water project watersheds. And also that DWR assess whether the use of a single statistically downscaled data set, CMIP6 LOCA2 hybrid, materially impacts the underpinnings of the LOC scenarios. And I'll note that it would have been even better if DWR had already done this in developing the LOC scenarios, especially now that they're being used beyond their original scope of informing the DCRs. Ms. Mullen, let's skip ahead to slide 20, please. So once a downscaled climate model dataset or datasets is chosen, if you are using a climate period approach, then you need to extract climate change factors from the downscale model projections and apply them to your historical climate record, basically nudging it up or down. For the LOC climate scenarios, DWR devised and implemented a new approach called variant averaging to extract the climate change factors from the climate model runs. So the CMIP6 LOCA2 data set, unlike earlier CMIP5 based data sets that DWR had used, CMIP6 LOCA2 includes multiple runs or variants from most of the climate models run under each emission scenario. This was not true for CMIP5 LOCA, which only included 1 run per model under each emission scenario. So the concept behind the variant averaging approach seems reasonable, but the devil is in the details. And I could not find in the technical literature any previous uses of variant averaging analogous to what DWR did for the LOC climate scenarios. More critically, the scenarios report by DWR did not cite any studies or other reports to support the use of the variant averaging procedure. So it appears that there is no body of experience using variant averaging in this setting to learn from, compare results with, establish sensitivity testing to different choices. And under cross-examination, Mr. Schwartz acknowledged the novelty of variant averaging, referring it to as, quote, a new technique, unquote, and said that DWR is at the, quote, cutting edge, unquote, of trying to use new information to improve modeling. It is my opinion that there has not been sufficient experience in the research and applications community using the procedure in the way DWR has done for the LOC scenarios to rely on the results for the purpose of credibly addressing the hearing issues. Next slide, please. Variant averaging as applied by DWR to construct the LOC scenarios has the effect of shrinking the range of precipitation changes seen across DWR's downscaled CMIP6 LOCA2 hybrid model ensemble. And again, that's an ensemble whose size was already reduced by other choices that DWR made. In this figure from the 2023 scenarios report, the right panel shows the spread of projected temperature and precipitation changes if the trend from each model variant is treated independently, more akin to DWR's previous approach to analyzing climate model runs. The left panel shows the spread when the trends from the 2 up to 10 variants from each model are averaged together, that is, variant averaging. So the cluster of 27 points in the left panel has narrowed quite a bit along the x-axis, precipitation change, compared to the nearly 200 points on the right panel. The temperature changes along the x-axis are only slightly shrunk by variant averaging. Now, if you're wondering about those black ovals or ellipses and the associated different gray shading within those ellipses, in the next step of their workflow, DWR fitted a bivariate Gaussian distribution or normal distribution to the 27 points in the left panel and also the right panel. But they randomly resampled 100,000 times from that idealized distribution. And in this figure, unfortunately, we can't see the actual points, but those ovals are basically contours showing different densities of points, with higher density in the center and then less as you get away from the center of those ellipses. Now, this resampling was done in order to produce a much smoother representation of the model data so that DWR could more precisely locate the LOC scenarios and their associated climate assumptions in terms of percentile. 50th percentile would be in the middle of the ellipse, 75th percentile a little further out, and then 95th percentile further than that. Next slide, please. And you may have noticed something else about these two clusters of data points and their respective ellipses. The ellipses that result from the distribution fitting and resampling have different tilts. And I added the orange dashed lines to help you see that. With variant averaging on the left, the distribution gets tilted more strongly downward and to the left. And that means that futures that are both drier and hotter, or much hotter, relatively hotter, so in the upper left quadrant, are less likely than other combinations of precipitation change and temperature change. And this apparent tilting away from hotter and drier futures was also flagged by one of the peer reviewers of the draft scenarios report. He cautioned that the variant averaging procedure could be altering information about the relationship between temperature change and precipitation change. The reviewer recommended very specifically that DWR analyze this tilting effect further, but there's no evidence in the final report that DWR followed through on that. My own analyses suggest that the increased tilting of the apparent climate space is an effect of both the variant averaging and the fitting of the Gaussian distribution to the 27 points and resampling 100,000 times. And let's skip us ahead, Ms. Mullen, to slide 27. Thank you. So why do these tilts matter to the 95 LOC or any other LOC scenario? They matter because the magnitude of the climate changes that get associated with a given level of concern are derived from how that ellipse of 100,000 points intersects with what is called a system response surface. So how the system outcomes, such as river flow, reservoir storage, and so forth. So this is another figure from the 2023 scenarios report showing that interface for the 95 LOC scenario. The gray and red dots, and there are 100,000 of them, are the 100,000 resampled points from the original 27 points. The gradation of pink and red shading is the system response surface. Darker shades indicate larger deficits in 8 River April to July runoff, this particular system response shown in this graph. You could have other system responses in the background, but this is a key one that is described in the scenarios report. As we would expect, the smallest reductions in April to July runoff are in the lower right-hand quadrant, where there are both increases in precipitation and relatively less warming. And then the gradient, the steepest gradient, goes diagonally and up to the upper left-hand quadrant, which is where we have both reductions in precipitation and relatively more warming. So without belaboring the details of this method, when you have the tilt of the distribution away from hotter and drier scenarios, as it is here, then the 95 LOC scenario will encode a smaller warming and a smaller reduction in precipitation than if the cluster of 100,000 points had no tilt or were tilted the other way. So while we're looking at this, we should talk about what a specific level of concern like 95 LOC really means and doesn't mean. The authors of the scenario report acknowledge that assigning probabilities to future climate states is problematic. And that's why they use levels of concern as the label to try to distinguish the LOCs from the unknown real-world probabilities. But the framing and apparent precision of an LOC invites confusing it with the real-world probability. And this was also flagged by one of the peer reviewers of the scenarios report. In fact, the 2023 SWP DCR report, which is the first to be informed by the LOC scenarios, makes this very error. It refers to, quote, actual 2043 climate conditions, unquote, having a 5% chance of being worse than the 95 LOC scenario. An LOC is a description of a location, such as the red dot, which is 95 LOC, within a distribution of data along two variables, period. We cannot reliably infer whether from climate model data or any other evidence the true and specific likelihood of a particular LOC occurring. Next slide, please. And it is revealing, or maybe even startling, to compare the future climate outcomes from the scenarios report underpinning the LOC scenarios with future climate outcomes shown in DWR's 2019 report on decision scaling. The 2019 report introduced the method of resampling a cloud of thousands of data points from a smaller set of climate model outputs that have been fitted with Gaussian distributions. And I'll note that the 2019 analyses on the right were based on the previous CMIP5 archive of climate models and did not use variant averaging of the climate model runs because DWR hadn't introduced that yet. The 2019 analysis area is the watersheds that contribute to the Central Valley water system. You can see that like the 2023 plot, the 2019 plot has a scattering of points representing model runs, but then superimposed are shaded ellipses showing the resampled cloud of points. And I've had to really adjust the left-hand figure so that the increments of temperature change and precipitation change were equally sized between these two plots. So first, you can see that the assumed space of plausible climate futures at mid-century for the project area is far smaller in the 2023 report than the 2019 report, particularly along the horizontal axis showing precipitation changes. Second, the 2019 ellipse has a strong tilt like the 2023 ellipse, but the 2019 ellipse is tilted the opposite way, so that relatively hot and dry futures are more likely rather than less likely. So I think this apparent discordant between the older and newer data is in large part because of artifacts of fitting a Gaussian distribution to the underlying model data from the climate models. And in the case of the new DWR data workflow on the left, you have only 27 underlying data points that are being interpolated and extrapolated into a neat, smooth, and tilted elliptical cloud of 100,000 points. And that's a lot of work that 27 points are doing. So let's skip ahead, Ms. Mullen, to slide 33. Thank you. So I've tried to show that the 95 LOC scenario and the other LOC scenarios are based on an overly narrowed and even distorted view of the plausible climate futures because of the particular workflow used to construct it and the other LOC scenarios. So here, let's see what the results of that workflow look like in terms of the sequence of annual stream flows that DWR then input into CalSim 3. In the upper panel, we've got the 8 river index water year flows assumed under 95 LOC in orange, compared with the historical baseline hydrology in dark gray. And the two time series are very similar at first glance. We would expect this because the year-to-year sequence and overall variability for 95 LOC and the other LOC scenarios are based on the historical climate record. And the historical climate record is also what drives the historical hydrology. 95 LOC does have some tweaks to the precipitation variability imposed by the limited use of WGen, and then the nudges to average temperature and precipitation from the climate change factors derived from the 100,000 point cloud. Now, if you look more closely at the annual differences, which I've plotted in the lower panel, in 95 LOC, the low flow years do get reduced compared to the historical hydrology. The near average years see less or no reduction, and the high flow years in blue are even higher than in the historical hydrology. So the worsening of the low flow years does mean that in the most severe multi-year droughts, the cumulative flow deficits shown in 95 LOC are appreciably worse than their counterparts in the historical hydrology. But then the wet years getting wetter takes some of the sting, you could say, out of those droughts in recovering reservoir levels. Ms. Mullen, let's skip ahead to slide 38, please. So other water agencies in the Western US have recognized that relying on a single CMIP dataset and workflow may lead to inadequate assessment of risks to their systems under plausible future climate changes. So these agencies have devised more, I'd say, pluralistic approaches to using the best available science. And here, the Bureau of Reclamation, for their evaluation of alternatives for post-2026 operations of the Colorado River system, this was published earlier this year, Reclamation developed a super ensemble of 500 plausible hydrology outcomes drawn from 5 different data sets. And those 5 different data sets are shown in each plot, with 5 of the box and whiskers plot, and then the yellow one is the average. And the values are not really the point here, because we can't directly compare them to analyses for the DCP project area. The point is looking beyond a single CMIP-based data set and workflow. So only one of these data sets comes directly from CMIP climate models. The other 4 data sets are based on historical flows, stochastic modeling, CMIP climate models, and tree ring paleohydrology singly and in combination. Reclamation's draft EIS comments about this approach. This is powerful information because it does not depend on any single hydrology ensemble being the correct representation of the future, unquote. Next slide, please. Another example here, much closer to the DCP project area. In fact, it overlaps with the DCP project area. In 2021, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, SFPUC, released its long-term vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan for its water enterprise. In addition to analyzing a large ensemble of downscaled CMIP-5 climate model runs, shown with the circles, SFPUC used an expert elicitation in which 9 researchers with deep expertise in California's climate were asked to quantify different scenarios for SFPUC's watersheds based on their professional assessment of the scientific evidence, including, but not limited to, climate model output. This expert elicitation produced scenarios here for the SFPUC's watershed in the South Fork of the Tuolumne that mostly overlapped with the CMIP-5 climate model ensemble in terms of future temperature change and precipitation change. But a number of the expert scenarios, shown with X's in the largest plot, were outside of the space demarcated by the climate models. These results from the 2021 report were more recently summarized in the March 2026 public draft of SFPUC's latest urban water management plan. And for the 2040 period, that draft says that most estimates of precipitation change from both the models and the experts range between -5% and +5%, and that a decrease in annual precipitation of 10% or more is possible by 2040. And for the 2070 period, the corresponding range of precipitation changes is between -15% and +15%. Next slide, please. So here's a final way to look at the main shortcoming of the 95 LOC and the other LOC scenarios here in terms of the what called the climate uncertainty space along 2 axes, with average temperature change on the vertical and average precipitation change on the horizontal. The climate changes for 2 of the previous DCP scenarios are shown with the green square, that's 2040 CT or central tendency, and with the yellow circle, 2040 median. And then with the purple diamond is the newer 95 LOC scenario at plus 1.8 degrees Celsius temperature change and about -2% precipitation change. You can see that 95 LOC is not very distant from the 2040 median scenario, even though 95 LOC is supposed to be a more extreme scenario. The yellow shading I've added to the background shows the spread of climate projections for 2050 for the Sacramento River Basin, so the northern half of the project area that I analyzed from the CMIP-6 LOCA2 standard data set. This data set is a close cousin of the CMIP6 LOCA2 hybrid data that DWR used in the LOC workflow, but the data set I am analyzing includes over twice as many climate models, and I did not extract the change factors using variant averaging. Instead, I used one variant per model and then 50-year period centered on 2050, which damps down the variability. You can see that the full spread of precipitation changes at 2050 in this larger CMIP6 LOCA2 data set is from roughly -10% to +20%, which is very similar to what we saw with the CMIP5 LOCA projections as analyzed in my previous testimony. And here with CMIP6 LOCA2, there are 72 individual model projections. 20 of them show overall precipitation decreases larger than the -2% assumed in 95 LOC. 9 of the 72 show decreases larger than -5%. So there is a lot of space to the left and also kind of extending diagonally above the purple diamond that reflect more stressful futures than 95 LOC. So when DWR says that quote unquote new science indicates a much smaller range of precipitation changes, as Mr. Schwartz claimed in his rebuttal, that's because of the particular choices they made in their new workflow, not because CMIP6 is showing something dramatically different than CMIP5 overall. Next slide, please. Now, at every step in that new workflow, DWR could have made other choices, or at least explored the sensitivity of the output to alternative choices. From my testimony today, I've taken and summarized some of those paths not taken, and those are in the pink shaded boxes. For example, you could use WGen's stochastic weather generator, the main module, instead of just the scaling module. You could use a larger model ensemble, with more models that will better reflect the true model or structural uncertainty in future climate. You could fit a non-Gaussian distribution to the climate model data that is more flexible and has thicker tails before you resample 100,000 points. Now, I'm not saying that DWR should have done all the things in the pink boxes. In fact, some of them are mutually exclusive, but doing any of them would have broadened their view of the future climate and the true uncertainty. Next slide, please. So to conclude, the 2043 95 LOC climate scenario does produce greater system model stresses than the previous mid-century CT and median scenarios used in the DCP FEIR. Likewise, the 2085-75 LOC scenario is more stressful than the 2070 median scenario from the DCP FEIR. But those are fairly low bars. In his rebuttal testimony, Mr. Schwartz asserted that the LOC scenarios now, quote, explore the range of plausible drawing in long-term average precipitation and multi-year and multi-decadal extreme drought conditions, unquote. But it was less than a year ago that DWR was assuring us that the original 3 DCP scenarios sufficiently addressed future climate risk to the DCP and that additional climate scenarios were unnecessary. Should we trust DWR's assurances now? Even the 2 drier of the LOC scenarios are barely exploring plausible futures that have less average precipitation than the past century. And that is a consequence of DWR's choices for the novel LOC workflow, not because the science or climate modeling has recently changed in some fundamental way. This matters even more because DWR's assumptions about future climate variability are tethered to the historical record, a record which we know is an inadequate sample of even past variability, let alone future variability. So collectively, the LOC scenarios are still underestimating both the potential for drying in long-term average precipitation and the potential for truly extreme shorter-term drought conditions. As the authors of Reclamation's Colorado River Draft EIS wrote, there is no one correct representation of the future. A more pluralistic approach to the best available science, not limited to a single small CMIP6 data set processed in a particular way, would only reinforce the plausibility of much drier and more stressful futures than 95 LOC. And by insisting that the 2043 95 LOC scenario with its 2% decrease in annual precipitation is an extreme future scenario or represents extreme future conditions, and not looking beyond the limitations of the LOC workflow, DWR is unnecessarily exposing the DCP and its stakeholders to foreseeable climate risks. In my professional judgment, moving ahead with the LOC scenarios as the extent of DWR's exploration of dry side climate change risk to the DCP is unwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. I think I will look to the room, but it seems like an appropriate time to take a mid-morning break. And then it looks like I will turn to you, Ms. Carroll.
That's correct. And yes, a break would be welcome. Thank you.
Great. Let's go ahead and take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10:28. Thank you. All right, welcome back. I will look to our court reporter. Are you ready for us to go back on the record?
I am hearing Officer Kinsey.
Excellent. We have Mr. Lucas. We have Ms. Meserve. Good. And I will look to Ms. Carroll. Do you have questions for Mr. Lucas?
I do. Sorry, we have a little bit of a sound issue. I was also going to ask that Ms. Morris be elevated, and I believe she has been. So
She has been elevated. Ms. Morris, would you like to make your appearance?
1, 2, 3. Good morning, Stephanie Morris for DWR.
Thank you. Good morning. And now I think we'll be good on audio because we're all muted accordingly. We'll see how it goes. To you, Ms. Carroll.
sorry about that. That was me. There was a pop-up right when that happened that I couldn't hit the mute button. Technology is foiling me this morning. So good morning, Dr. Lucas. Welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you.
And Ms. Mullen, you're so fantastic with this. Can you please pull up Land 67 as we go through, and Dr. Lucas will make sure that you're oriented with your testimony as needed.
And thank you. And I will point out, I do not have a PhD. I think that's clear from my CV. So you do not need to refer to me as Dr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas is fine.
Mr. Lucas, then, thank you. Just get myself fixed up here real quick. Okay. So you mentioned in your testimony, and we're on PDF page 8, Ms. Mullen, that Mr. Schwartz showed that the 2043 LOCA 95 had a 3-year period in which precipitation over the Feather River watershed falls to 59% of the long-term average. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you also cite in your testimony that you reviewed Ms. Desjardins' independent calculations that confirm Mr. Schwartz's findings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then did you also conduct independent calculations that also confirmed Mr. Schwartz's findings?
I did. Wait, hold on.
Okay, that's fine.
No. Let me, I'm sorry, I will need to reverse myself.
That's okay. It's referring to
yeah,
pages line 9 to 11, if that helps you at all.
No, I've got it. So
Okay.
I confirmed Ms. Desjardins' calculations regarding the unperturbed historical precipitation record for the Feather River. I don't believe either of us had the data to confirm Mr. Schwartz's calculations. I took them entirely at face value.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And Ms. Mullen, can we go to PDF page 32, please? And Mr. Lucas, this is figure 5 from your rebuttal testimony, correct?
Correct.
And am I correct that the right side of this figure was extracted from Mr. Schwartz's testimony?
No, yes, the right side, yes, is just copied right out of Mr. Schwartz's testimony.
Okay. And did you confirm that 59% of long-term precipitation equals to 647 millimeters per year?
I did not perform that calculation. Based on the calculations I made for the record in the left panel, that looked correct.
Okay. And so did you create that figure on the left panel?
I did.
Okay. And does that figure on the left show the same time series as the figure on the right?
It does not.
It does not. Does it show the same time series as the figure on the right for 3-year annual precipitation, but for the baseline scenario?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And based on this figure 5, is it true that the same drought period in the baseline run has an average precipitation over that 3-year period of 689 millimeters?
That's correct.
Okay. And bear with me, I'm doing math. 689 millimeters, that's 62% of average in the historical baseline record. And then if I subtract 647 millimeters, 59% of the long-term precipitation. Is that a difference of 42 millimeters?
That is a difference of 42 millimeters.
All right, I did it right. Okay. Do you recall what the long-term average precipitation in the baseline scenario was?
Not off the top, but I tried to use, the same average as Mr. Schwartz, which looks like from the right-hand figure, it's about 1100 millimeters.
Okay, so I'll represent to you that it looks like 1100, but it's really 1098 millimeters.
Okay.
So if you use my calculation where we got that 42 millimeter difference, right? And you divide it by 1067 millimeters, which is the combination of 689 and 640. No, that's not it. I did my math wrong. So, hold on one second. Let me get my math right. Okay. So we had that 42 millimeter difference, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If you divide it by 1067 millimeters, which I believe is long term.
No, well, I think you just said it was 1098.
And maybe I'm wrong in my math. Okay, so if I divide it by 1098, I still think I'm going to come out to about 4%. Would you agree?
I think that's very possible.
Okay. So would that equate to a conclusion, if my math is correct, that a 3-year drought is about 4% drier?
Yes.
Objection incomplete. Then drier than what?
Drier than what? I mean, Mr. Lucas, you could interpret this from this chart here in figure 5, correct?
Well, I'll have you explain what you were asking me before I commit to that.
It's okay. I don't want to confuse us with my bad math anymore. Let's just move on.
Okay.
Okay. So in your testimony, you suggest that the 2043 LOC 95 scenario isn't really that extreme because the difference appears small. Would you agree?
You'll have to be more specific about what difference. Are we talking just about this graph?
Yes.
My assessment that 95 LOC was not extreme that conclusion, or my opinion was not based solely on this graph.
Okay.
So I can't answer the question as stated.
Okay. I think I'm going to have to go to my bad math, so bear with me. So we did math earlier where we did that 42 millimeters divided by 1098 millimeters and came out with a 4%, correct?
I will agree with that.
Okay. And would you agree that 4% is a very small difference between the 3-year drought in the historical versus the LOC 95?
Compared to the difference, I would need a frame of reference. It is, I would say, it's very small compared to the difference between the level at 1933 as a percent of historical long-term average and the long-term average itself. So the 4% is smaller than the anomaly or departure from the long-term average in either of those two time series.
Okay. Would you agree that your testimony doesn't provide any specific level that would be dry enough?
Objection vague.
Mr. Lucas, you nodded your head. Did you understand the question?
I understand, but I also appreciate Ms. Meserve pointing out the vagueness of it. Dry enough. If you could be more specific about what you're getting at.
Well, I guess in your experience, what would be dry enough?
Objection vague, dry enough for what?
I think that's fair, Miss Carroll.
Okay. Dry enough as to your analysis for this project. Because you're looking at these extreme scenarios. So what is dry enough in these scenarios that you're evaluating for this project?
Objection misleading. DWR is the one whose burden it is to analyze, so I don't think the question is properly phrased.
Noted, but I'll allow the question with that caveat. Please, Mr. Lucas.
Sure. I understand. I believe what you're getting at, but my testimony was not oriented around the idea that I have a specific dry enough or level in mind that DWR needs to meet. Because again, the burden is on DWR to do the analyses in a way that represents plausible climate change risks to the DCP. What I have tried to point out in my testimony is that DWR made choices that would tend to restrict the representation of both extreme droughts and overall drying in precipitation. So, and my point on this slide was not to, with this figure was not to, say that one value for, percent of long-term historical average would be dry enough. It was simply to point out that nearly all of the deficit in that particular 3-year drought in 95 LOC is coming from the historical record, not anything coming from the climate models.
Okay, so as you sit here today, you can't say what would be an appropriate level of dryness to evaluate this project.
No, because that would require me to have had more time and resources to take the inputs that DWR used and alternative inputs and basically redo their analyses. And that was not in my remit.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. We'll move on to the next section. Are you aware of the population of California in 1906?
Objection, what's the relevance to is it outside the scope?
I think and believe that the data that he refers to in his testimony goes back to 1906.
What does that have to do with the population?
The population has to do with the circumstances that would create the climate change.
What? Wait, what?
Population affects the climate change conditions, and so we just had a couple of questions about that, and also about we should have used a hydrological record going back to then. I can move on. It's fine.
Please.
Do you know how many stream gauges were installed in California in 1906?
Objection, outside the scope.
Mr. Lucas suggested that we should have used the hydrological record going back to 1906. So that would have had to have been obtained in some way, such as stream gauges.
I'll allow that if you know, Mr. Lucas.
I do not know. What I do know is that I sourced the 8 River Index, unperturbed historical flows from DWR and on a public facing site. And so I assume that these would not have been provided without, there being some expectation of them being used to compare with stream flows later in the record.
Do you know what technology was used for stream gauges in California in 1906?
I do not know specifically, but I assume it was a float. Even back then, it was a float-based technology where the river has a connection to a stilling well in which there is a float, and I couldn't tell you, the details of reading the river stage level and using a rating curve to convert that to CFS.
Okay. And do you know how often those gauges were read?
I do not. I only, have some understanding of that from the modern day.
And do you know whether it's common for DWR to use pre-1921 data in water supply analysis?
I do not, though I'm assuming the way you phrase the question that it is is perhaps not common.
Do you know whether it is common for the water board to use pre-1921 data in water supply analysis?
I do not know that.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to page 31? Take a look at figure 4, Mr. Lucas. And does this show the frame of reference for the LOC scenarios?
It shows, that should probably be explained. It shows the temperature changes and precipitation changes and as analyzed by DWR using their workflow from each of 27 climate model and emission scenario combinations. So yes, it is thus the frame of reference for the LOC scenarios.
Okay. And is it your opinion that a scenario that is drier, so less precipitation, would generally be considered more extreme?
Yes.
And
More,
is
extreme is as you know, it is a vague term. There is not a numerical equivalent. So I would hesitate to say, when you say something is more extreme, I think, a scenario that is close to a median or close to that is current conditions would not be considered extreme. So to say that that a scenario that's slightly drier than that is more extreme is kind of pushing the bounds of what you would use the word extreme for. I would just say it's drier and not try to attach extremity to something that is close to the median.
okay. Instead of using the word extreme, would you say that it's more stressful for the system?
It typically is, though it depends on the the modeling of the system. But for the system response metrics that DWR has used, I'd say that's a generally a good assumption.
And so in figure 4, do you agree that it shows 27 blue dots that represent the range? Oh, I'm sorry, that represent the change in temperature and change in precipitation for the 2043 climate period?
Yes.
Okay. And the red diamond is the temperature change and precipitation change that DWR imposed on the 2043 LOC 95 scenario, correct?
Yes, or I'd say associated with that scenario or assumed in that scenario.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So is it your opinion that a scenario that is warmer would generally be considered more stressful to the system?
If precipitation remains the same, yes.
Okay. And if we were to rule out all of the wetter outcomes, so the blue dots to the right of that yellow dotted line, and all of the cooler outcomes, which I'll say are all the blue dots below the red triangle, how many blue dots would be left?
We would have one, but that is not the way the response surfaces work that DWR has used to locate where the 95 LOC is.
Would you agree that DWR's LOC 95 is hotter and drier than all but one model run?
I would not stipulate that, because there is at least one dot that is much warmer. Actually, there's several dots that are model runs that are actually, these are composited model runs. So these are model estimates of change from a single model. And I will stipulate that there are several that are warmer. It is not necessarily the purple diamond is not necessarily the most stressful, or even the second most stressful, because the response surface gradient runs at a diagonal from the lower left to the upper right. That is a much warmer climate outcome that has more precipitation than historic could actually be more stressful than what is shown in the purple diamond.
Okay.
And my main point is not just that, the location of the purple diamond, with respect to the 27 CMIP6 LOCA 2 models. It is how DWR's workflow arrived at a relatively narrow construction of the CMIP6 underlying model data. That is the 27 blue points.
Okay. And Mr. Lucas, would you consider yourself an expert in California climate?
I do not. I consider myself someone knowledgeable, but not as expert as I am on the climate of the interior West.
Would you consider yourself an expert on California water resources?
I do not present myself that way, and that is not necessarily the point of my testimony. It is to investigate and interrogate the climate change assumptions made by DWR in the LOC scenarios.
Do you know which model DWR and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation used to simulate the Central Valley water system?
Objection vague.
For what purpose, Ms. Carroll?
To understand the application of the modeling that DWR uses for hydraulic modeling and for
So
the
you
purpose.
mean currently, I mean, that they are currently using?
Yes.
For,
If
you
you-
said Central Valley water system? Which systems? Do you mean both systems or?
Yes, both systems.
Maybe you
So
could
the-
restate the question.
If you see the
Yeah.
CVP and the SWP, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'll restate it.
Right.
Do you know
Thank you.
which hydrologic model DWR and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation used to simulate the Central Valley project and the state water project?
Objection outside the scope of his testimony.
I will allow the question, please, Mr. Lucas.
I do not know the name of the system model used for that purpose. I don't honestly see its relevance, whether I know the name of the model or not. I have a general sense of what these are used for, and I am pulling my, in terms of, what I'm showing, I'm pulling largely from DWR's own reports.
Have you personally worked on any studies that use calcium 3?
No.
Have you, I might have just asked this, so let me, no, skip that one. Do you know if calcium 3 operates to meet D1641 requirements?
Objection outside the scope of his testimony.
That may be, Ms. Carroll, where are we going with this?
I'm trying to understand his familiarity with the calcium runs because he mentions it's on page 5, line 25 to page 7 to line 6.
Did
And
we
so,
just go there?
yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Mullen. Page 5, line 25. If he's talking about climate change assumptions and how they can be used with water system models, I need to know his understanding of calcium 3.
Which line are you on? Sorry.
It's page 5. It goes from page 5, line 25 to page 7, line 6.
And you're saying this is relevant to calcium 3?
Yes, I'm saying that it's based that if he's going into the climate change assumptions and how they can be used in the water system models.
This is outside the scope of his testimony.
I don't see the connection here. I mean, I'm thinking this through. Especially with respect to D1641. How is this connecting back to the climate runs?
So a climate period run is a calcium term. And so it's in the way that DWR runs calcium. So that's why I wanted to understand Mr. Lucas's experience and understanding with calcium. And the calcium releases are based on meeting D1641.
Well, I'll allow the question. I think we can just clarify this. Mr. Lucas, you may need
Yes.
to run the question again now that we've had a long discussion.
Okay.
I think we're getting hung up on terminology because the climate period approach used as I have understood it in DWR's own documentation, it is similar to what is more generically called across climate change and water resource applications as a period change approach. And it just refers to using the historical climate record as a baseline because that's what your system models like calcium 3 have been calibrated to, and then perturbing that climate period with a change factor extracted from climate models or another source of information about future climate change.
Okay. Are you familiar with the way that calcium runs?
Asked and answered.
Overruled. Mr. Lucas.
Am I familiar? I mean, not in all of its details. I dug enough into the input files for calcium that I was able to, extract and plot the 2043 95 LOC hydrology versus the unperturbed historical hydrology. So I've looked at the input files and the output files. I've skimmed reports on or documentation, internal documentation from DWR about the function and workings of calcium 3. I could not speak to exactly how it runs.
Okay. Are you aware whether any calcium 3 study has been run with a transient climate approach?
I am not, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are aspects of calcium 3 that would make transient runs difficult or impossible. But there are workarounds because I have done I've been part of studies by other water agencies where they had system models that were limited to using at least major features of the historical record because they had system outcomes at a daily time step that matched those. And they could not do a true transient approach, but they were able to merge aspects, you could say, of a transient approach with a climate period approach. Now, it is not beyond you're right, it's not beyond the technical capacity of DWR to at least integrate elements of a transient approach, I believe.
Okay. So would you consider a workaround such as what you've described to be a novel approach?
No, in that it's been done before by at least two water agencies I can think of. So in that sense, there is some, previous operational experience with using that kind of approach.
And do you recall what those two water agencies are, or who those two water agencies are?
So one was, I believe, the Colorado Water Conservation Board in the 2012 Colorado River Water Availability Study, and then updated analyses after that. And then the other analysis that I'm much more intimately familiar with, unfortunately, I did that work under an NDA.
Oh,
I can't. I think even within this hearing, because it is all of the transcripts and are made public, I am prescribed from identifying that it was a major municipal water utility.
okay. I don't want to get you in trouble with your NDA, but can we say that this entity is not a California entity?
That I can say that.
Okay, thank you. And then, did either of these entities use calcium in their
No.
analysis?
No.
Okay. Let me find myself again. Are you? Okay. Are you aware of any calcium-3 study that was not anchored to historical observed data?
I am not. I look, there is a report that I believe is one of my exhibits that lists, actually it was the scenarios DCR report, the 2023 report that we discussed at length. In my testimony, it has an appendix that lists out the different studies that have been conducted by California agencies, not limited to DWR. I believe some of those used a transient approach, but I cannot say for sure that they deployed calcium 3 or a previous calcium version.
Sorry, other things are beeping on my computer that are not related to this hearing. Um, so you are concerned about the fact that DWR used only the CMIP-6 LOCA 2 set of models, is that correct?
You would have to be more specific. My concern was not, just with CMIP-6 LOCA 2. It was using the smaller version of CMIP-6 LOCA 2, which is LOCA 2 hybrid, and then further that DWR had to discard some of the models and model output to complete the full workflow using CMIP-6 LOCA 2 hybrid. So just 11 models from one emission scenario and 8 models from the two other emission scenarios. So that is one of my concerns, yes.
Okay. Would you consider the CMIP-6 LOCA 2 dataset that DWR used state of the art?
I believe that it would qualify as state of the art. I've used it, not the hybrid version, but the standard version in other analyses myself. So yes, I consider it state of the art.
And Mr. Lucas, do you know of the California Fifth Climate Change Assessment?
The one that is in production or in development currently?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you know if whether CMIP 6 LOCA 2 dataset is the same dataset being used by the California Fifth Climate Change Assessment?
I believe they are using as the primary data set CMIP 6 LOCA 2 hybrid, but using all 15 models, I presume.
All 15 models of,
CMIP 6 LOCA 2 hybrid.
just making sure.
Yep.
Do you do you know whether the California Fifth Climate Change Assessment uses any other climate model ensembles?
I am not aware of that.
Okay. In your testimony on page 10, lines 11 through 13, you point to the, I think it's called the WUS D3, is that right? Or the WUS D3 ensemble
Right.
of dynamically downscaled models as something DWR should have used. Is that correct?
No, that is not an accurate characterization of my testimony.
Okay, what is the correct characterization?
That they should have at least consulted the output, which I think they have access to. It developed in part by California-based researchers, and at least looked at the output for the project area to understand any differences between that and CMIP 6 LOCA 2 hybrid.
Do you know how many runs are in the WSD3 ensemble?
Yeah, it's a smaller, like any dynamically downscaled model set. It is a smaller data set, you know, with fewer models than in any comparable statistically downscaled data set because of the computational complexity and cost of running the regional climate model, which is at the core of dynamical downscaling procedures.
Okay. Does the WSD3 ensemble contain any runs that are variants, meaning multiple runs of the same model and emission scenario with different initial conditions?
No, but that's not relevant to being able to compare the model output. All you need is models under the same emission scenario that have been run through one downscaling procedure and the same model and emissions scenario having been run through the other downscaling procedure.
Would the WUSD3 ensemble have limitations in terms of understanding climate signal versus interannual variability?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Would the WUSD3 ensemble have limitations in terms of understanding climate signal versus interannual variability?
You could not necessarily apply variant averaging to it. I think you can, if you are using it in a diagnostic sense and not operationally to produce climate scenarios, that is less of a concern. And what you would be looking for in the dynamical downscaled model output is basically mechanisms or processes or more generic expressions of future change that are not present in the statistically downscaled data set.
Did you do any analysis to show that the WUSD3 ensemble would yield a substantially different result for the range of plausible climate outcomes for California?
Objection outside the scope.
I'll allow the question, Mr. Lucas. No, I did not. And if I had done that, I'm sure I would have shown it. Again, I was limited in what sort of alternate analyses, and it feels somewhat incomplete to say, well, they should have or could have done this or used a different technique. I did not have the wherewithal, remit resources to do that work. So I relied on, two recent studies that I cited and used as exhibits, one of which indicated that there were changes in precipitation mechanisms for the Western U.S. that were not seen in even the CMIP-6 LOCA2 hybrid data. So no, I did not do my own runs. I also relied on the concern being shared by one of the peer reviewers of the report, who also pointed to dynamically downscaled runs as an important point of comparison with CMIP-6 LOCA2.
And Mr. Lucas, did you review DWR 1318, which you cite to? It's the risk-informed future climate scenario development for the State Water Project Delivery Capability Report.
Yes, I did.
And would you agree that that report incorporated input from those peer reviewers?
Objection vague, as to which peer reviewers, as there were several, I believe.
As to all three peer reviewers.
I'd say it was incomplete, the incorporation of their feedback, where the reviewers proposed very specific changes to wording, a sentence up to a paragraph. Those changes were incorporated into the final report. When in instances where the reviewers asked that DWR conduct additional analyses, that was not incorporated.
So you note the removal or shrinking of the number of models from the CMIP-6 ensemble to the standard LOCA2 ensemble, and ultimately to the hybrid LOCA-A2 ensemble. Did DWR make those choices?
The CMIP-6 LOCA2 standard data set was developed by researchers at Scripps. So no, DWR did not make the choice to use only those models in developing that particular data set. DWR's choice was simply to use that data set and not other statistically downscaled data sets. And for the hybrid, no, that choice was not made by the going from 25 to 15 models was not made by DWR, at least not directly.
Okay. And so by your previous testimony, did you do any additional analysis, or did you just rely on DWR's data and the citations that you provided?
No, I did other analyses in my previous testimony that were facilitated by the CalAdapt archive and website, having, there were data that were pre-clipped to the area of interest and period of interest. So it was much less time consuming than it would have been to work with the data behind the LOC scenarios.
Okay. In your expertise, is there a minimum number of models required to be used for this type of analysis?
Objection vague. Can you be specific about what type of analysis?
The type of analysis we've been talking about for the last few questions.
I'll allow the question, Mr. Lucas. If you need more clarification, let us know.
No, I think that's fine. There is no hard and fast. What previous sort of best practices guidance has suggested is that once you get down to about 10 or 15 models, you are likely to shrink the apparent uncertainty across the model ensemble. That doesn't mean it's unusable. It's just something to watch. And so my concern with DWR's model ensemble as they used it from CMIP 6 LOCA 2 hybrid is not that it exceeds some some threshold, which does not exist as a go, no go. It's that in addition to all of their other choices, further led to or was likely to lead to a narrowing of their view of the future climate space.
In your expertise, do you know whether there is a requirement for project level analysis that compels a lead agency to conduct this kind of comparative climate model analysis?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
Within the scope of your expertise, Mr. Lucas, please.
I do not believe that there is any such standard. I think that's just a wise practice, if not best practice, is to understand the consequences and implications of choosing one data set or method over another.
Thank you. And Ms. Mullen, DWR submitted a cross exhibit called DWR 1176. If you could please pull that up. Thank you. And Mr. Lucas, are you familiar with this article?
Excuse me, you're going to have to wait a minute until I can get the document.
Okay.
Thank you.
And can you scroll down, please, as you're calling it an article published? It looks like it was published in an AMS journal. Okay, thank you. It's from Bulletin 2026. Can you scroll down further? Okay, so that's all the information. Okay, so this is an early release of a soon to be formally published article. I may have seen it come across my desktop in some form. I can't say that I've read it.
And I'm just asking the hearing team to confirm, unless you let me know, Ms. Meserve, that this has been moved over.
Yeah, I don't see it here. It doesn't sound like the witness is familiar with this article, so I'm not sure that there's any foundation
Right.
for asking questions. I'm not able to obtain it in any case. But.
It sounds like it's been moved over now, so you should be able to refresh and find it, Ms. Meserve.
Okay. But yeah, I object to asking questions about this because he's not familiar with it.
Noted. Let's see what the question may be, or whether you choose to ask more questions. Ms. Carroll.
Yeah. So, Ms. Mullen, if we could go to page 8 of the article. And I think right there, that's perfect. Mr. Lucas, I'll give you a minute to read through right here, but this article concludes that there are no standards, and I'm curious as to whether in your experience you would agree with that conclusion.
Objection. He's not familiar with the article, and she's asking him to agree with the conclusion that's, I don't know how many pages into it. I don't see how this is proper.
Let's
how is he even able to understand the context for this?
The context of this, I think that is a legitimate concern, Ms. Carroll, that,
if they want to use this in their rebuttal, it's open.
Thanks, Ms. Meserve, for the suggestion. We'll take that. We'll move on to the next one. Ms. Mullen, if we could please go back to land 67, page 24. And Mr. Lucas, you point to some of the analysis and model assumption. Hold on, let me try that again. You point to some of the analysis and model ensemble inclusion that was incorporated into the post-2026 Colorado Reservoir Operations Draft Environmental Impact Statement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is it correct that the post-2026, and we call it the DEIS, concerns operation of reservoirs on the Colorado River?
That's correct.
And the post-2026 DEIS addresses reservoir operating rules for the Colorado River Basin. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And does that DEIS evaluate how shortages are allocated among basin users?
It evaluates different alternatives for, yes, evaluating how shortages would be allocated among basin users.
Would you agree that one of the central concerns of the post-2026 DEIS is preventing critically low reservoir elevations?
I'd say that's fair.
Would you agree that the post-2026 DEIS is fundamentally evaluating responses to long-term supply-demand imbalance?
Objection goes beyond the scope of his testimony.
I'll allow the question, Mr. Lucas.
I'd say that is the imbalance is one of the concerns, and I think the ability to cope with shorter term departures from of unfavorable hydrology is also a concern.
Is it your understanding that the Delta Conveyance Project is a water shortage sharing framework?
It is not.
Do you know if the Delta Conveyance Project would establish new statewide shortage allocation rules?
No, it would not.
Would you agree that the appropriate scope of scenario analysis depends on the decisions being made?
It does.
And what page are we on? Ms. Mullen, to page 11, please. Line 16. Thank you. Mr. Lucas, you point to several previous studies conducted by DWR in which we used your preferred method of basing period change factors on a single or small number of models. Is that correct?
I object to the characterization that that is my preferred method. I use that method because it was what DWR had used in its own previous analyses, and I was trying to remain consistent with those.
Fair. Do you know when the CMIP-6 LOCA 2 ensemble of models was released?
I cannot recall whether it was, well, and there were two releases. There was the standard version with 25 models, and I believe that came out at a different time, perhaps earlier than the CMIP-6 LOCA 2 hybrid version. And I believe both those data sets came out in either 2022 or early 2023.
Do you know whether the LOCA 2 archive includes variants of different initial conditions runs of the same model?
It does.
Would you recommend basing period change factors on a single or small number of models?
You would need to ask that differently. Is you've provided two different conditions.
How would I need to ask that differently?
Yeah. Okay, so I will split it in two. I think I stated in my previous my rebuttal testimony that using a single extreme or outlier run that has been processed with a 30-year average is not best practice, but a compositing a small set of model runs could be.
Thank you very much. Do you know whether the CMIP LOCA 2 archive adds information that was not available for studies conducted prior to 2022?
Objection. Can we tie this back to the testimony? Is there mention of the archive here?
We're talking about his testimony here on page 11, where he's referencing these models.
I'll
Right.
allow the question, please, Mr. Lucas.
To the extent that the two things, the underlying global climate models are CMIP-6, which were not available in any form prior to about 2019 or 2020. So that would, to the extent that they show different climate changes for California and other areas than the CMIP-5 climate models, which they're very, very similar, honestly, in terms of their overall output as a set of global climate models. And then the LOCA 2 downscaling methodology, which was implemented in 2022 with and applied to the CMIP-6 models by the Scripps researchers. That methodology is somewhat different in certain respects than the LOCA methodology. So there are at least, two ways that the CMIP-6 LOCA 2 could be different than, say, CMIP-5 LOCA.
Okay. Are you aware of any previous studies that DWR published after 2022 that used a period change factor based on a single model or a small ensemble of models?
I am not aware.
Okay. Is it true that all of the studies you cite in your rebuttal testimony were released in or before 2018?
That's a broad coverage. Are we talking about, can you be more specific about what studies I cited?
The ones in your rebuttal testimony.
Are we limited to DWR studies or any studies?
Yes, let's limit it to DWR studies.
And you're asking if 2018 is the cutoff?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I cited the 2023 scenarios report, obviously. Are you saying other than the 2023 scenarios report?
Yes, other than the 2023 scenarios report.
Well, okay, and I guess the SWP DCR of 2023 I've also cited, or are you not counting that because it uses the output from scenarios DCR?
Right.
Okay. I see a report, the decision scaling evaluation of climate change driven hydrologic risk to SWP. I think that was 2019.
Okay.
I cite other studies. Are we talking climate change analyses specifically? As I
I'm
cite,
gonna object to this as what's the relevance of this question? I mean, there's a list of references at the end of his testimony that provides the dates of each reference. So where are we going?
I can move on. Mr. Lucas, you said in your testimony that the use of a 30-year averaging period is a compromise between capturing a snapshot of the evolving climate appropriate to a particular time horizon and averaging over a sufficiently long period to damp down the presence of natural variability. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And Ms. Mullen, if we can go to page 12, lines 21 to 22. Mr. Lucas, is it fair to say you endorsed approaches that blend multiple runs into one climate scenario and avoid using the most extreme climate change signal suggested?
In the context of using a single of a data set having a single run per climate model, yes.
Do you know whether DWR blended multiple climate runs coming from a single model and emission scenario, but different initial conditions into a single run?
Yes, that's the whole point of variant averaging.
Okay. And Ms. Mullen, can we go to page 36, please? And Mr. Lucas, is this figure 5-7 from DWR's 1318?
It is.
And you estimated the range in precipitation change from the figure on the right, the one with no variant averaging, as -7 to +12%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you estimated the range in precipitation from the figure on the left, the one with variant averaging, as -4 to +8%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Excuse me. And is it your concern that this compression of the range unduly reduces the potential climate change signal?
This is one piece of evidence that supports my concern.
Okay.
It is not the only one.
Okay. And so using this figure, can you estimate the range of temperature change in the figure on the right?
Roughly a little under 1.0 degrees plus 1.0 degrees C to about 2.5 degrees C.
And could you also please do that for the figure on the left?
A little further under 1.0 degrees C to maybe 2.3 degrees C.
Okay. And so would you agree that that range you just calculated doesn't change that much?
I indicated that in my testimony.
Why would you suspect that the precipitation range compresses by several percent while the temperature range doesn't really compress?
Well, I think it's what we've discussed in kind of the whole series of testimony and rebuttal with myself and Mr. Schwartz, that precipitation is much more variable in both the historical and observed climate and the modeled climate as seen in individual climate model runs.
So you agree that temperature inherently has less natural variability?
Yes.
Okay. And so the variant averaging methodology isn't compressing the range of potential impacts from temperature because temperature inherently has less variability. Agree?
I mean, that's likely, but without digging into this implementation of variant averaging, I mean, all I can say, I can't say why.
Okay. And would you agree that DWR's LOC 50 scenarios generally explore the center of the climate uncertainty space?
Yes, I think that's fair.
Okay. And would you agree that DWR's 2043 LOC 95 moves away from the center of the climate uncertainty space and moves in the direction of more stress on the system? So higher temperatures, drier precipitation, more sea level rise?
I can't speak to the sea level rise, but
Okay.
I can with respect to temperature and precipitation. And yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And would you agree that DWR's 2085 LOC 75 moves away from the center of the climate uncertainty space and moves in the direction on the more stress of the system?
That is correct.
And have you done any analysis of whether a more extreme climate scenario would have yielded different results for project impacts?
Objection vague as to what different means.
Different results than those presented by DWR.
Not
Which results?
Are you
Oh.
referring, Ms. Carroll, to the results in the LOC model runs that were submitted to the AHO?
Yes.
The 95th percentile LOC, if that's the right term, I think. Mr. Lucas, please.
Yes. No, obviously I do not, have access to calcium 3 to do my own runs. So I rely on my observations of the output that DWR has put in the 2023 report, and then more recently on an online dashboard showing the system outcomes from different scenarios. And so that is where I am gathering more generic findings that moving in the direction of warmer and futures and less precipitation would lead to worse system outcomes. I think that's evident in the scenarios that and model output that DWR has made publicly available.
Mr. Lucas, I wanted to ask what you meant by you do not have access to calcium 3.
Well, you're correct. I could have asked DWR. I do not have the resources, the wherewithal, and personal expertise to do my own analyses with calcium 3.
And Mr. Lucas, thank you so much for your time. That's all of the questions that I have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. Are there others with questions for Mr. Lucas? And I don't have additional questions, so I will look to you, Ms. Meserve. Do you have a preference? Do you need to think about whether you have redirect, or would you like to answer that question now?
I had noted a couple of quick follow-up questions, so we can just
Then
go right
please.
into that, I think. But,
Great.
I wondered, and I think you may have covered it in your testimony, but you were asked, Mr. Lucas, about the peer reviewers of DWR 1318 and incorporation into the final report. Do you recall that?
I do.
And can you explain what your concerns were with the aspects of the peer review that were not incorporated into that final report?
Well, I mentioned some of them. The peer review reports were generally quite thorough, and covered many aspects of the analyses. Peer review is it's laudable that DWR commissioned those peer reviews, but it is a little troubling that their input was applied or changed the final report in only superficial ways from the draft report. Particularly this specific request from one reviewer that DWR better explore or further explore what the variant averaging was doing to the apparent relationship between temperature change and precipitation change, the increase in tilt between the distribution of the climate model data before and after variant averaging.
So you didn't feel that the final report addressed that concern fully?
Not that particular concern, and there were a few others. Here's an example of one that was not used, and this is from Dr. Feldman's review, which is one of my one of the exhibits. Actually, it might have been one of Deirdre's exhibits. Sorry, I don't. can I quote from that, or do you need it up? No.
I mean, it's only if you care to, expand on the answer. I was just, wanting to give you an opportunity to clarify that point.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's up to you whether you want to go into further.
I think I will, because this is actually quite an important point.
The hearing officer, Kinsey, I appreciate the opinion of Mr. Lucas. However, I believe this is going outside of the scope of redirect.
There were quite a few questions about peer review.
About the peer review. I'm going to allow it, but I do want to make sure we can pin down what exhibit this is.
Sorry.
Which I understand it's hard to keep track.
No, yeah, two of the exhibits we submitted, one had already, reviews had already been submitted. So this is DDJ 75. So one of Deirdre's exhibits.
Thank you. And this is I think you said Dr. Feldman's.
Dr. Feldman.
And
peer review.
Mr. Lucas, is there a page number?
Yes, 15.
Thank you.
You have that? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where Dr. Feldman says, quote, all this being said, the report, meaning the draft scenarios report, does need to have an expanded set of statements in Chapter 6 on the limitations of what was done, the sole use of statistical downscaling solutions and sole use of initial condition variance instead of both initial condition and perturbed physics variance means that figures 5.5 through 5.17, the ones showing the ellipses of the 100,000 resampled points, those figures are subject to revision, he says, at least in that the range of results will grow. All of the ellipses will grow in size when multiple plausible downscaling solutions are used along with perturbed physics variance. So this nicely dovetails with what I was concerned with in my testimony. I didn't discuss perturbed physics variance, but definitely the use of parent consultation of a single downscaling solution.
I'd like to object again because, Mr. Lucas just said that he didn't discuss this in his testimony for the perturbed physics variance.
Noted, but I'm allowing this on redirect, although I think we're ready for the next question.
Yep.
Okay. There were some questions from Ms. Carroll regarding what were novel approaches and whether water agencies had used CalSim for those novel approaches. And I know you weren't able to discuss one of the examples you provided due to an NDA, but I guess my question was just why, in your mind, are those examples relevant even if they weren't using the CalSim tool? The CalSim model, I should say.
Yes. So they're relevant because both of these examples involve system models that run on daily time steps with hundreds, if not thousands of nodes representing, multiple objects representing multiple reservoirs, inflow points, diversions, water rights. So they are, I cannot say they're probably not equally complex to CalSim 3. I have that understanding of California's water resources, but they're quite complex. And because of their complexity and their calibration, that argues against using a sort of a pure transient approach and just incorporating climate change model or global climate model output directly into those system models. But I believe the principle is the same, that there are in-between approaches that merge some of the advantages of a transient approach with a broadened perspective of future climate variability while staying close enough to a period change or climate period approach that the same complex modeling tools can be used to explore system outcomes.
And You were also asked quite a few questions about figure 4 on page 31 of your testimony, which I believe the way you describe it in your description discusses this narrow frame of reference for the LOC scenarios.
Yes.
And so can you explain why you would still be concerned even if there was only, for instance, as Ms. Carroll pointed out, one dot that was warmer on the left side of the pink dotted line that is showing the zero and the precipitation change?
Sure. And I wish I, had merged two of my figures, but can we
So
go
we go
down?
to land 67, page
Yep.
31, if we could, Ms. Mullen, so that he could explain.
So can we also, you've got land 68 up. Can we go in land 68 to, sorry, slide 27, please? And we can flip back and forth. Okay, so we've got the same scheme here in this plot. We've got temperature change on the y-axis and precipitation change from large reductions to large increases on the x-axis. And then what's important here is that response surface. So the shading and gradient from light or even white to light pink to dark pink, because that is the response of April to July 8 river index flows as modeled by CalSim to different combinations of warming and precipitation change. And you'll see that it's, the diagonal means that it's that both temperature, the diagonals of across the gradient means that it's both warming and reductions in precipitation that drive ever larger deficits in 8 river index April to July runoff. So if we go back to land 67, the slide we were on, or the figure we were on, and imagine those diagonal lines going across, the worst system responses are towards the upper right-hand corner, not directly to the left or upward, but there's sort of a combined vector that goes diagonally to the upper right-hand corner, and that is the direction of worse system responses. So you could actually have, less warming, relatively less warming, but a precipitation reduction, and that could be equally as stressful as a very high warming and no change in precipitation or even a slight increase in precipitation.
And the last question I had pertained to the paragraph 67 and 68 of your testimony that Ms. Carroll asked you about, and she asked you about some differences with respect to the purpose of the DEIS that you cited, due to the fact that the DEIS is evaluating operations of Lake Powell and Lake Mead, as you recall that?
Right.
And could you explain why you believe that the analytical framework used by Reclamation is nonetheless instructive here with respect to a proposed conveyance project?
Sure. I mean, in both cases, we're talking about multi-billion-dollar infrastructure, multi-$10 billion infrastructure that supplies water to tens of millions of people and enormous amounts of economic activity. And in one case, that infrastructure is yet to be built. That's obviously what's at issue here. And in the case of the reclamation DEIS and the Colorado River, that infrastructure already exists. And so they are analyzing different ways of operating it. But I think that the general principle of needing to understand what risks climate change could plausibly bring to the functions of that infrastructure so that it either does or does not fulfill its purposes and with what impacts, that is a commonality between the water system analyzed in the DEIS and the object of this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Ms. Meserve. Does that complete your redirect?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carroll, do you have follow-up?
I do not have any follow-up, but I'm hoping we can take some of this extra time today to talk about some procedural issues next.
Great. Would you, and I gather you'd like to do that now. So with that, Mr. Lucas, I will say thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your testimony and your answering all of the questions today, and you are excused.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey and others.
Then with that, we, I believe, have completed our witnesses for the day that we have scheduled. And I will turn to, looks like Ms. Morris. Do you want to jump in on procedural issues?
I don't know if I want to, but I think we,
Well,
we would. So
Great,
I
great.
think you asked us to have some preliminary thoughts on Sir Rebuttal today. Is that
Please.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
And I would also like to explore whether you have additional detail about phase briefing. So I will start while you're thinking about that.
Great.
And specifically, DWR is planning to do Sir Rebuttal as it relates to modeling, including but not limited to climate change assumptions, water quality, groundwater, HABs, additionally, fisheries issues, cost-benefit analysis, and cost estimate. We do plan, as I mentioned, to offer some revised and new permit terms and potentially some other public documents to try to minimize the amount of Sir Rebuttal that we need to put on to respond to this round of testimony. And finally, I would note that we have been attempting since May 27th to meet and confer per the AHO's request with DTEC regarding some of the exhibits that were excluded or portions that were excluded. And we need to do that before we can sort of figure out if we are going to be doing Sir Rebuttal. And since May 27th, we've been asking DTEC to provide us confirmation about which tribes they have delegated authority for us to be able to discuss confidential information to determine the scope pursuant to the AHO's request. And we've gone back and forth a couple times with Ms. Safdie, and we don't think it's a meaningful meet and confer without being able to understand which tribes have delegated authorization so we can have a meaningful meet and confer. I want to note, all that being said, that Ms. Safdie, I believe, is out until July 6th, which really is constraining given the July 24th deadline. So we plan to submit something in writing to deal with that issue to allow Ms. Safdie and DTEC to respond.
Okay. That sounds like an appropriate way forward.
Great. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you need more detail.
No, thank you for the, I think that was quite helpful. My initial reaction to this list, which is helpful for my thinking about, I think what you staged closing briefs, is that the list of Sir Rebuttal is fairly comprehensive. So I'm not sure that there's anyone, any interest that would potentially not be affected by Sir Rebuttal, which makes me think that phases may not be efficient or workable. In terms of timing, Ms. Morris, I don't know if you have a thought today, but I think we have 3 days set out for sir rebuttal. Do you have a sense of whether that's an appropriate amount of time? I don't know if you know your witnesses at this point.
I thought it was 4, but
Maybe it's 4.
it's 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think it could be doable, especially if we would attempt to be very efficient in the presentation of direct to allow a majority of the time for cross-examination. So, I mean, it might be wise, I think, to add, if we have 3 days, I think it would be good to have at least 4 days, and we might want to add a 5th just to ensure that we have it on calendar given schedules.
Yep.
And I would just say that it is broad categories, but it's not going to be every single thing of every single one of
Super.
those testimonies. So we are endeavoring to be select and surgical.
Great. Good. That's good to hear. I think the next step is for me to digest this information and see if I have any additional questions or thoughts tomorrow. But this list is very helpful. Thank you. And
I wasn't able to meet to discuss this. Sorry, it's just been a bit of a push here. I did not check with Mr. Krieger. He may have, sir, I don't know. I don't remember where we landed on that, but I think he might have. I did not connect with him to see what his thoughts were on timing as well.
noted. And I see Mr. Krieger's hand now that I look up. So let's please elevate Mr. Krieger. Good morning, Mr. Krieger. It's still morning. You're welcome to make your appearance and chime in here.
Thank you. Good morning, Hearing Officer Kenzie Miles Krieger for the State Water Contractors. Yeah, picking up where we left off last week, it's in your 9th procedural ruling where you give SWC the right to serve rebuttal as well. And so we have not, had the full opportunity to even finish cross-examination, as I mentioned last week, with respect to Ms. Cooley, to really understand what the full scope of our serve rebuttal might be. However, I will say that we do expect it to be pretty limited and focused primarily on what I'll call sort of local planning issues that have come up with respect to our various agencies. And so I would imagine that we, may have 3 or 4 witnesses, and to be frank, probably fewer than that. So we don't expect to have, a voluminous presentation on Sir rebuttal for timing purposes. So I think what Ms. Morris was suggesting in terms of timing should, fit well with what we currently have in mind, if that's helpful to you.
Thank you. That is. And I will look, I think it makes sense to chart out at least 5 days, and then if we don't use them, that's excellent. So I will look at the calendar over today, and I'll float some dates in the morning tomorrow. I won't expect everyone to have a response to that immediately. But we will have this conversation, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're together. We have so much time together this week, so we have a chance to talk about it. Ms. Morris, did you want to jump back in on this?
2 quick things. We confirmed it's only 3 days. I guess I have wishful thinking. And then I guess finally, I apologize. I got the freeway was shut this morning, and I was behind. But did we agree that we would start with Burke and Wilson and then go to DDJ or to Miss Desjardins, and try to finish her by 3 tomorrow?
I don't think we closed that loop, but there was a need for, well, I think it was on DWR's end, where there was more information, possibly, which I don't know if you have in terms of, I think, availability for cross. Ms. Carroll had mentioned there may be some other roadblocks to
I
the
think,
proposal.
well, I think it would be best if we could, just for being the least risk adverse, that if we would start with Miss Desjardins so that we would be able to hopefully conclude with her before lunch or soon thereafter, and then move to the South Delta Water Agency witnesses and I'm doing my best right now to look and minimize the cross-examination for those witnesses to see if we can get through them and the Papalardos, which I think are scheduled after on Thursday or Wednesday. I'm confusing. Are the
I think
Papalardos?
they're
Yeah.
scheduled for Wednesday and then carryover if necessary.
Carryover, right? So should we
Right.
plan to do Papalardos carryover Thursday, go to Miss Desjardins and then to the South Delta witnesses? Would that work?
Do you have a preference, Ms. Meserve? I know this is on the fly.
Yeah, I'm looking at my various, I mean, yeah, I'm concerned about Ms. Desjardins getting better so she can testify. I'm hoping that she is better by Thursday morning. I think we should, yeah, just plan on putting her first. It sounds like
Yeah,
if you guys do, if DWR does have time limitations, that probably is safest, even though, as I mentioned, I think there's a preference to do it, the other way around, but, I think, we still have tomorrow, so I believe that Ms. Moscow has worked out that the Papalardos are planning to go after the economic related testimony tomorrow.
I feel there's
And
a
I-
good opportunity we will be able to finish the Papalardos and the two
Yeah.
other witnesses tomorrow and not have them carry into Thursday. I feel like, knocking on wood, 95% confident we can get that done.
And I see we have, and I know Mr. Busher, you probably had a comment on Sir Rebuttal. I will get back to you. I see we have Ms. Moskal and it looks like Mr. Collin. If we can have both elevated, please. If you have comments on the order of go. Ms. Moskal, you're welcome to make your appearance.
Good afternoon, Ellen Moskal on behalf of Sacramento County et al. I just wanted to chime in regarding the Papalardos that we have held time on the 25th for them and they are available if absolutely needed, but they would vastly prefer to finish tomorrow afternoon given scheduling conflicts. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Great. We will aim for that. Mr. Collin.
Hi, good afternoon. Augusto Colin for DTEC, student attorney of the clinic. Only because Ms. Morris mentioned this, we got an email from them, from Ms. Minton, regarding the confirmation of authority regarding the confidential information. And we did answer that petition and we just asked for some clarification in order to have that meet and confer. So we are just waiting for their answer to that email that Ms. Sabdi sent, and we will address this with them gladly.
Great. So it sounds like there's ongoing communication. Please continue that, and as needed, if something needs to be submitted in writing, you certainly can do that, Ms. Morris. Yes.
I'd like to clarify, that's not exactly accurate. We've asked, starting in May 27th and twice, we have specifically asked, because we believe that for the meet and confer to proceed in a meaningful way, that DWR needs to know which tribes have delegated authorization to DTEC to discuss confidential information. It's not possible to have a meaningful meet and confer without having that information because each tribe has specific information that DWR considers to be confidential. Again, I don't think it's fair to DTEC with Ms. Safdie not being here. So we will be doing something in writing. But I do want to be clear that we are not going to respond because they asked us for the scope of our SIR rebuttal, which was not what the AHO said. The AHO said if we were going to seek SIR rebuttal, that we needed to meet and confer regarding confidentiality and not to disclose what we would be seeking SIR rebuttal on. I hope that's clear. But again, I think it would be best if we did this in writing and allow people to have more thoughtful time to think about and respond.
I think that's right. It will help me understand, and it may clarify the issues. So thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Busher, I promise to return to you, please.
Thank you, Hearing Officer Kinsey. Eric Busher for San Francisco Baykeeper. I just wanted to flag two things. I thought we were going to talk about the closing briefs today, so I was here ready to do that. I will try and be here later this week if that happens then. But if not, one, we wanted to make sure that we had the transcripts from all of the phases of the testimony available to all the parties well in advance of whenever the closing briefs are due. From our experience in prior proceedings, those transcripts are a lot easier to use than the YouTube Zoom generated ones or the video themselves in putting together those closing briefs. And there has been sometimes very quickly and sometimes some delay in terms of getting those available to all of the parties on the FTP site. And just wanted to flag that as one issue. And then the second issue I wanted to flag in connection with both scheduling Sir rebuttal and scheduling closing briefs. For the tribal parties, the month of August is essentially unavailable due to ceremony and other cultural religious practices that occur. And just want to make sure that that is we convey that information to you, and that is one of the considerations that comes into play as we schedule the additional hearing days. It sounds like probably two more, and think about how the closing briefs are scheduled as well, because it's exceedingly difficult for them to participate in any sort of meaningful way during the month of August on these issues.
Thank you. Noted, and I will look at that when I'm thinking about if we are scheduling additional days. Thank you, Mr. Busher.
Thank you.
And I will try not to spring anything. I mean, in terms of our discussion about closing briefs, I know I need more time to think about the issue. Thank you for being here. But I will not spring it on you without you having an opportunity to join us. I see Mr. Schutz has a hand raised. If we can please elevate Mr. Schutz. Good afternoon, Mr. Schutz. We have reached afternoon.
Good afternoon. We have. Thank you very much. One other issue related to getting ready for briefing and even Sir rebuttal is that we don't yet have rulings on some of the objections to testimony. And in particular, those for CSPA, I'd like to see those before we make a lot of further decisions. And just a reminder that we're anxious to see those.
Yes, thank you, as am I.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morris.
On that note, since we're winding down for this phase, I don't think there's a current deadline for the submittal to the AHO to move rebuttal exhibits in and for any objections to those exhibits.
Yes, I don't think we have those, so I will set those before we finish on Friday. You
Great.
can, I will leave it to you, to Ms. Morris, to think about whether, I mean, it's DWR can make an offer that usually, and state water contractors, that's usually fairly, no. The protestants can make their offer, excuse me. That should be in fairly short order. So to all the protestants, you can start drafting up your email in writing. It is helpful to have it in writing what the offer is exactly, so we get those exhibits clear. And then Ms. Morris and Ms. Carroll and state water contractors, you can think about an appropriate, if you'd like to make a suggestion as to appropriate deadline for objections.
Not before
Not now.
July 24th. I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll think about that and
Yep.
let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Meserve, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just one other procedural item. I don't think there's anything further happening on this based on my understanding, but there was the motion for reconsideration on the witness portion of the subpoena for the muscle expert from DWR, and I'm assuming from the lack of any further discussion or writing on it that there will be nothing further. I may ask for my witness feedback from DWR since I did pay for those witnesses. Not a lot. Yeah, so I just, at some point, clarity on that issue would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you. I will get something out in writing. Thank you, Ms. Meserve.
And we will void the checks as soon as, if we haven't already voided it based on the previous ruling, we would void the checks.
Thank you.
Thank you all. These are good, important cleanup issues. Is there anything else we should address today? Otherwise, we are reconvening at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. All right. Thank you for your efficiency, and I will see you at 9 o'clock tomorrow. We are adjourned.